Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Larissa, and I am the marketing manager here at Vembu Technologies, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. Today's topic will cover a competitive analysis of BDR version 3.0, along with its features and capabilities. We have two fantastic speakers with us here today, but before I get into the details, I do want to set a few ground rules. Today's session is being recorded, and during the webinar, feel free to feed your questions into the chat window located on the right-hand side of your window. We will have a Q&A session at the end to address your questions, so you'll be able to interact with both Jack and Len. Our speakers today include Jack, he's the managing director of OpenBench Labs, and Len, he's the president of Vembu Technologies. I'll give you a quick overview of Vembu if you're not familiar with us, and then I'll introduce our speakers and we can dive right in. So Vembu Technologies was founded in 2004. We are a private company and we've been profitable since 2006. We're headquartered in Dallas, Texas, and we service about 4,400 partners who in turn reach out to 60,000 businesses. 70% of our business is located in North America, and we've seen an annual growth revenue of about 30% for the past 2 years. We mostly sell to value-added resellers, enterprise, and small to medium-sized businesses. Our largest customer is Terramark. We also serve Hitachi as well, and you can see a few more of our customers down below. Our heritage is in the storage and backup industry, so we do have a complete solution set for various types of backups. Our BDR product does file-based backups, disk image backups, as well as virtual backups for HyperV, VMware, and Xen environments. Additionally, we have a file sharing application. It's very similar to Dropbox, except it's more secure for businesses. And we have a CRM solution, which includes a sales desk, a help desk, and a social desk. So I'll introduce today's first speaker. His name is Jack. He's the founder and managing director of OpenBench Labs, and he consults through Ridgetop Research. Previously, he was the editor-in-chief of Open Magazine, Data Storage, Back Office CTO, Client Server Today, and Digital Review. Jack also served as CTO of Strategic Communications and IT Director at Riley Stoker Corp. Jack also holds a PhD in mathematics and likes long walks on the beach, and he's an Aquarius. All right, Jack, I'll go ahead and start over on your first slide. Are you there with us?
I am here.
Perfect.
So since we're talking about backup and the problems of backup, probably the best place to start might be looking at what's happening with digital content. And basically in 2015, nothing's traditional. What we have is an incredible explosion in content that's now getting measured in zettabytes, which basically start thinking about millions of petabytes and petabytes being millions of gigabytes. In a survey on digital content, which was actually funded by EMC, done by IDC, basically they say that from 2005 to 2013, we've increased from about 1 zettabyte to 4, with 50% year-over-year growth in just total digital content. This is everything getting created. And now, in 2015, we're up to 9. The 4 was for 2013. And the prediction is that by the end of next year, we'll be looking at 13 zettabytes out there of digital content. Now, this has good news and bad news. So as we go to the next slide, we're looking at what's what's the good news here? Because that's a lot of data to be worried about. And the nice thing is that 60% of it is not useful. Most of this is basically idle chit-chat. However, on the bad news side, 34% is real. So that means currently we're looking at about 3 zettabytes of useful data out there. 80% of that data is derived from what we would normally think about, data processing, and now add in social media. And here we're talking about places like Facebook and Twitter, where we're actually looking at data that is valuable to a company. Now, a lot of times that means the company itself is using Facebook and Twitter to generate and enhance their own sales position. Looking at basically augmenting with discussions about their products. 20% of that useful data happens to come from what is now being known as MEMS, embedded micro electromechanical systems. This is also more popularly called the Internet of Things. And here you're getting sensors embedded into just about everything, making this a giant greenfield for big data. These sensors, companies like Hive and Nest, which deal with the new smart home instrumentation, so that you're coming back from a business trip, you want to turn up the thermostat in your house, you do it from your smartphone. Other areas where this tagged microsystem data is coming into place is in aircraft. The new Airbuses are looking to tag with RFID tags every single part with its history of maintenance, so that whenever you're repairing an airplane, and airplanes have to go in constantly to have their parts checked, you can instantly RFID any piece of the airplane and get a total history of its repairs, and also at the same time get the manual for repairing it. Other areas where this comes into play is in smart cars. In Japan, Hitachi is working on sensors in bullet trains where they can monitor all of the equipment on the train as it is in work. Unfortunately, of all of this useful data, less than 3% of it is currently being analyzed. So again, we have another huge greenfield, but this time for business intelligence. So the problem is poised to explode exponentially. There are areas such as big data, business intelligence, which are way underutilized currently. And most companies are looking to start utilizing it now. Now, how does this play out in the world? With the next slide, we begin to look at what's happening out there. And basically, you have Moore's Law, which says that compute power increases and the relative cost decreases at an exponential pace. Basically, Gordon Moore, who was one of the founders of Intel, observed that what happens every 2 years, you double the number of transistors possible in a chip. And that just keeps going linearly. And it's still going linearly. And that creates an incredible amount of compute power out there. Now, what is going on is all that compute power is now meeting some very basic 18th century mathematics. This began with Euler in 1735, who decides he's going to solve this problem, which was known as the Seven Bridges of Königsberg. The question was, could you, in that town, take a path, cross all 7 bridges, come back to where you started without ever going over the same bridge twice? And in solving this, he created the basics of what we now call graph theory, and topology is born. This gets transformed within 100 years by Sophus Lee, who says, you can take these complex geometric shapes like a sphere and represent it by a finite number of surface of elements. And he comes up with this idea of representing complex shapes with finite groups and algebras. Now that's all very nice and dandy, but no one at that time had any way of calculating this. How do you deal with, what does this do in the real world? Well, today, what's happening is you can take these ideas, represent them as nice, friendly computer matrix calculations, and start talking about genome sequences, quarks, BI data relationships. All are pattern matching. This is all driven by this notion of pattern matching, and if you can simplify it down to a calculable matrix problem, all hell breaks loose. Basically, Moore's law suddenly looks like Piker in terms of advancements. Looking at just in medicine, in sequencing a genome, on the next slide, what we see is the cost from about 2001. It's about $1 million to sequence a section of a genome. That drops today to under $1,000. And as you see, when you sort of superimpose it with where Moore's law, which is just the computing resources take you, you start making even greater, more massive savings. And it all comes from Moore's law giving you the basis, the compute power, the amount of storage. All of that becomes a reality. And then you've got the mathematics that goes way back to the 18th century that you can now apply. And when you do apply it, you get to places like precision medicine, a whole brand new area in medicine where genome sequencing is going to require loads of data, loads of compute power. But this goes on to customer personalization as well. And we see that companies like Netflix, Comcast with their Xfinity on the next slide, are analyzing patterns in terabytes of their user data. With 44 million users, Netflix analyzes the data of what they're looking at, who they are, and comes up with personalized media recommendations. What does that get them? Well, in 2013, their year-over-year subscriptions increased by 25%. So all of this is leading to very important business-critical applications. Business-critical applications that need a lot of compute power, need a lot of resources, but actually Moore's law has created a situation where the typical server is way more powerful than is needed to run a particular workload. And that created the door for virtualization. So as we see on the next slide, there has been an incredible growth in workloads run on a VM. In 2005, not a long time ago, just 10 years ago, 2% of workloads, x86 workloads to be precise, were running on a VM. Today, nearly 75%, and Gartner is projecting that by 2018, it'll be up to 88, 89% of workloads. Almost everything virtualized in about 10 years. Incredible. But again, that introduces new problems. Because line of business users, on the next slide, executives who are just dealing with business applications, they do not concern themselves with backup. Backup is just a thing that IT does. What they are deeply concerned about is recovery. So with these new applications, which are essential for businesses, essential, because now we're talking about real money, where computers in the beginning were used essentially for kind of back office data processing, and were really an overhead situation. We're now talking about competitive advantage, being able to produce a genome faster, cheaper than anyone else, being able to personalize data for your customers faster and better than anyone else, be able to analyze what's going on a bullet train or an airplane faster and better than your competitors means business. So we now have an actual ISO standard which is out there for government regulators to prove that businesses are indeed making the proper arrangements in case of a disruptive event. In other words, backup, recovery, and disaster recovery are now falling under an ISO standard for which certification is beginning to pop up. And here we start talking about, because this ISO standard centralizes on the recovery point objective to minimize loss of data, and the recovery time objective to minimize the time it takes to restore. So it's creating a framework that backup and data protection has to work within. In other words, it's no longer what you want to do, quickly back up and hope that you never have to recover. Those days are gone. That tradition is over. Now it's an SLA that guarantees not only that you can recover. Recovering is just part of the issue. You've got to do it fast, and you've got to minimize the amount of data that's lost in the period that you're recovering from. So what does that do for on a VM? And as we see on the next slide, you've got to provide protection for a VM running on a server OS. But there's an issue there. VM has sort of a split personality, bipolar to be precise. It's both a hypervisor application on a host server, but it's acting like a physical device. It's acting like it's a physical server running a server OS with applications. So dealing with it is a non-trivial problem. So many sites end up running multiple data protection packages. One package for servers, one for VM servers. Now all this does is create a significant amount of management overhead, especially at SMB sites, because your limited number of IT administrators now have to be expert in multiple packages. One size in these cases, or one set of procedures does not fit all. They can be radically different. The other problem is protecting active business critical application. Traditionally, you have backup windows. During the backup windows, the applications were all quiet, the systems were quiet, and you simply back them up. That doesn't work any longer, especially when you have an SLA that says you can't lose more than maybe 15 minutes or an hour, 2 hours max of data. When you've got an aggressive RPO, you're going to have to be taking incremental backups throughout the day while the system is active. And if that system is transaction-oriented, let's say a sales order entry, a trading system, a banking system, even a very active genome modeling system. A lot of I/O is going to be going back and forth. And when that happens, you've got to have a very tight integration, because you now have, going back to that split personality, you're taking a snapshot of a VM, which is all nice and dandy, but you also have to take snapshots within the guest OS. So you've got snapshots within snapshots. And if you're not very creative and intelligent, and this is on the part of the backup protection vendor, that can end up being a huge problem in terms of time. Even though you're using the fastest transport modes, a fast fiber channel or a fast iSCSI SAN 10 gigabit E, data transfer isn't the problem. Now it's clearing snapshots. So even though you can transfer data in parallel from multiple disks of the VM, that does you very little good if you now sit and wait for 10, 15, 20 minutes just waiting for snapshots to close. That doesn't work. The other issue is the time to restore, RTO. RTO is a separate issue from RPO. You need to be able to bring up a system very quickly. And there you need a warm standby VM if we're talking about a real business critical application that's got to be up and running completely in, let's say, 5 or 10 minutes. Booting from a backup file will work, but there are going to be severe I/O limitations. I/O will now be limited because when you're booting from a backup file, you've got to have a way to redirect that I/O, because basically you're not going to write back to the backup file directly. You're going to need to either have a redo log or some sort of cache or some mechanism to redirect I/O. And that's going to limit I/O because you've added all that overhead. So really, to meet the objectives of both RPO and RTO, you're going to need tight integration between backup and replication. If that doesn't exist, then you're going to be backing up and doing backups for replication, which is insane. So a key becomes that tight integration. But the real magic, and a lot of that we'll probably talk about in future webinars, is in the backup repository, how you store that backup data, because that is what really makes the difference for any backup system. And that brings us to Len, who's going to talk about how Vembu does it.
Great. Thanks, Jack, so much. I do see that we have some questions starting to pour in, but just to make sure we keep us on time, I'm going to save those until the end of the webinar during our Q&A session. So let me introduce Len Srinivasan. He is the president of Vembu Technologies. He has been identified for the SMB 150 award that recognizes professionals who have mastered business leadership in the SMB IT channel. He has also been named to MSP Mentor 250 that identifies the world's top managed service provider experts. He was also recognized as Channel Chief 2014 by CRN, and he gets my vote for Best Boss of the Year. Hi, Len. How are you today?
Hey, doing great, Larissa. Thank you so much, Larissa, and thank you so much, Jack, for wonderful information about data, compute, virtualization, and ending up with backup and data protection. So pretty much I'm going to pick up from where Jack left off in terms of the real magic happens in the backup repository, the way the data is stored in the backup repository. That makes a whole new difference. In fact, that was one of the areas where Vembu as a company has been focusing on for the past few years to build a patented system that helps us to store the data intelligently with proper understanding of the VMs, the workloads, the IO, the applications, and help the customers to support their RPO and RTO metrics by having the data made instantly available from the backup repository. At the same time, also give them the option to perform live replication of the data center, whether it be a VMware or HyperV, and have that replicated for instant standby, and also have that backed up so that they could do a point-in-time recovery that meets the RPO and RTO objectives. So let me give you a background about BDR version 3.0, the latest new product from Vembu Technologies. So the idea for this product to be available, because I know there are zillions of backup products available in the market, we are coming in from a managed service provider background. So we started giving out or creating products for managed service providers. So what we ended up doing was creating a product where an MSP could use and potentially offer it for small businesses. And typically we had to cover multiple different environments, ended up being managed by a managed service provider by providing him a single pane of glass view. But that also seems to be a requirement for even businesses, because with the conception of IT being virtualization coming into the picture in the past few years, there is a mix and match of different environments that ends up in a business. So you end up with a VMware, you end up with a HyperV, you end up with a physical server, a Linux, a workstation, and you have a common RTO and RPO general backup policy for your organization. So a typical business ends up using about 3.7 backup products to achieve backups. Though that might sound neat for now, like they simply use tools for different backup requirements. But in the longer run, maybe 4 to 5 years into the system, they feel it very difficult to manage multiple different vendors for managing the backups, and it becomes a pain in terms of monitoring and managing the backups itself. And in the recent survey that we did, in fact, 75% of small businesses mentioned that monitoring and managing the backups is the biggest pain point rather than the backup itself. Now, coming from this MSP background really helped us to create one product that functions across different environments, whether you do a physical system backup or a VMware or a Hyper-V or a Xen, and whether you'd like to do a file backup or a disk image backup with application-aware snapshots like SharePoint, SQL, Exchange, etc. BDR is your one-stop shop. It also has live replication to another data center of your own choice. And we also have built-in offsite data transfer to our cloud, which is Amazon AWS. So you have an on-site copy, an offsite replication, and at the same time have the data also sent to our cloud for additional redundancy. It gives a single pane of glass view of monitoring and managing all of your backups. It's a very simple transparent value pricing. It's $20 a month. You could have unlimited VM backups. That's per host. Whether you back up a physical server or you back up a host that runs multiple VMs, you end up paying one single cost. And we have a top of the line technology, a high performance block storage that deduplicates, compresses, and encrypts. And at the same time, though the data is in that highly compressed, deduplicated state, we still offer the ability to perform instant boot or instant mount from the backup server for instant recovery of data. Though through deduplication and compression, on an average, you get about a 50% storage reduction from the original production data. This is how a typical BDR deployment looks like. So we have a client agent and a backup server. So it's an agent server architecture. And touching upon the points further mentioned by Jack, specifically on certain VMs where you have an application running. Let's say, for example, you have a production exchange running inside a VM. And it's like, let's say it's a lot of transactions are happening, a lot of IO. It's a large VM. Trying to take a snapshot from the VMware itself is going to cause more IO limitations on the VM that might end up either freezing the VM, or your snapshot is going to take like 30-40 minutes, for which the entire VM will be in the freezed state. In order to avoid that, we recommend installing the agent inside the VM and have the backup performed that way, so it doesn't interrupts the processing production server. At the same time, you also end up with an application-aware backup job by having an agent installed inside the VM. At the same time, if it is some of the other VMs that is not IO intensive, you could still do an agentless backup. We have 3 different types of data transfer mode. You could do a SAN mode backup, where the data will directly be transferred to a SAN that is attached to the backup server, bypassing the local network. We could do a hot add mode, or you could do a traditional network mode of data transfer. And the backups, we also have agents for physical servers. We have agent for HyperV, a desktop and a laptop. So different environments, one product that does application-aware backups, compression, encryption, deduplication, and file-based or disk image-based backups to a local backup server. And you could also perform replication to an offsite environment or to the same local environment, or have an optional data transfer to our cloud running on Amazon AWS, which is HIPAA high-tech SOX compliant. So what's new with VMware with BDR 3.0 is our enhanced support for VMware environments. Vembu is a VMware elite technology partner. We utilize the VMware APIs. We have also integrate into the vStorage APIs, SRM, and also the IO filtering APIs from VMware to perform a live backup and also replication. We have built a new technology called as Power Replication Technology for active live replication of VMs. Granular recovery tools for Exchange, SQL, SharePoint, and Active Directory. We also perform the industry's first cross-hypervisor disaster recovery using instant boot technology. So if you go with a traditional mainstream product using a Windows-based backup server, we give you the option to take a VMware backup and boot it in Hyper-V for instant recovery. Or you could run your backup server on Linux, like using Ubuntu, and you could use the KVM. So technically you could back up a VMware and you could boot up in KVM. So you don't have to think about provisioning a costly environment for disaster recovery, but rather utilize the one that you have already and utilize some of those platforms like Ubuntu and KVM for performing instant restores. And all of the snapshots we do is application consistent backups and restores. And we have plugged ourselves into Amazon AWS for offsite data transfer. It is optional with guaranteed RPOs and RTOs of less than 15 minutes, which is possible because of the way we store the data in our patented file system. And all for $20 for 2 physical sockets for a month, and you could have unlimited VM backups. And similarly for VMware, we have also provided enhanced support for Hyper-V environment. So the problem with Hyper-V is that they don't provide extensive APIs like VMware. So we have built our own proprietary CBT driver, which is continuous block tracking driver for Hyper-V environments. So we support Hyper-V VMs running on clustered shared volume, both for 2012 and 2008. And we provide granular recovery like Exchange, SQL, SharePoint, and Active Directory. And we also support first and second generation VMs running on Hyper-V. That is both VHT and VHTX. And you could restore a VMware, like a Hyper-V VM, to VMware, and also vice versa. That's something we talked about earlier. We have a completely redesigned new user interface that makes it pretty much easy to configure and run the backups with BDR 3.0. And we have also made sure that the entire backup deployment, right from start to end, is pretty simple, straightforward, and we strongly believe in the product. So we have also offered the free support, 24/7 free support for our customers. If you have any questions with the product, you could simply call us 24/7 or send us an email, and we'd be helping you to make sure you configure the product right and help you with any questions you might have. This is how the backup job listing looks like in the BDR user interface. So from the client agent, you could configure multiple backup jobs, with one job doing the physical environment backup, the next job focusing on VMware environment backup, etc. You could configure the scheduling. You could run the backups every few minutes or every hour or daily, depending on how frequently you want the backups to run. And the overall process is very simple and straightforward. So why should users switch to BDR? Is very straightforward reasons here. So it has, first of all, you have free desktop and laptop backups. So if you'd like to back up your workstations, you do it for free. We have flexible deployment options, like you can do a local or a hybrid or cloud, depending on how you want to set it up. It is a one-stop solution for VMware, Hyper-V, and Xen. And you have application consistent backups with granular recovery for Exchange, SQL, SharePoint, and Active Directory. And all incrementals can be booted or mounted and restored instantaneously. Either you do it locally, or these could also be performed on our cloud. And you have guaranteed RPOs and RTOs of less than 15 minutes. And a simple pricing, it's $20 a month for physical server or a VMware or Hyper-V. And it is a simple pay-as-you-go pricing model. I'd also like to talk about our Vembu Hive file system, why it is important, and why this makes a very big difference in our backup product. So, like, we take a particular snapshot, we break it down into blocks, and we have our own database that stores all the blocks that we have, and all blocks are being referenced. And this also helps us in deduplication, because we perform a variable length dedupe, which is one of the finest form of deduplication technology available in the market. And after dedupe is done, the blocks are all being compressed. It is encrypted and stored in our own file format. And though the system is in such a highly compressed file format, you have to think of a restored process if you'd like to reverse these processes. But though it is in such a format, we still give the ability to do a mount or a boot of that particular data without having to perform a restore. So you get instant access to data, and that data can also be sent offsite over the WAN to our server running on the cloud for additional redundancy.
I do have a message from David that says, just as an FYI, we chose Vembu because the prices on other solutions were not affordable to our small business clients. Thank you very much for the awesome application and affordability. Thanks, David. We're happy that you're happy. And another one from Israel. Beautiful. Thank you for being amazing and a great company.
Oh, thank you so much.
You guys are the best. And Boris agrees with David. Thank you, guys. we love to hear feedback. We actually we've built the company based on hearing feedback from the people that use the product. So anytime that you have something to tell us about our product, definitely get in contact with one of our developers or partner managers, because we love to hear that feedback. It's what we thrive off of. So any improvements, or if you have any special use cases where you're running into difficulties, definitely let us know, because that's what we use to make our products better. Fantastic. Thank you, everybody, so much. I'll go ahead and close out the webinar. If you do have any questions, go ahead and email those over, and we'll be in touch with you. Thank you so much, and have a good afternoon. And thanks, Jack, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. Thank you so much. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.